No nanny lasted a day in the Whitmore mansion. That was the legend, that was the warning, and somehow I still pushed open the golden gate like I belonged there. Glass popped in the distance, red paint slid down a white wall like the house itself was bleeding, and 3 6-year-old boys stared at me like they were guarding a border. Another black nanny, Tyler, barked, "Daddy said you're cheaper, you won't last an hour." I could have turned around, I could have done what 17 women did before me, but where I'm from, you don't flinch at volume. You read the room, you find the heartbeat. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, learned early that kids who act like hurricanes usually learn the weather from the adults, studied education at Howard, specialized in childhood trauma, spent a decade on floors in community centers building trust out of blocks and patience. So I put my bag down, ignored the $50 million of shine and echo, and I knelt in the middle of the battlefield to stack wooden blocks. Mason, the quiet one, narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing?" "Building a fort," I said. "Every war has a headquarters. Every headquarters needs a foundation." Dylan froze with a paintbrush. Mid-drip, Tyler paused with a toy truck cocked like a grenade, and in the doorway, Margaret Whitmore's pearl necklace caught the light, while her voice tried to cut me down to size. "Miss Williams, my boys are energetic," she said. 17 nannies in 6 months. The last one went to Harvard and lasted 15 minutes. Behind her, Richard Whitmore's Rolex showed up before his humanity did. "How much are we paying for her?" he asked his wife, like I was a coffee machine. I stacked another block and kept my voice soft. "I understand what broke, ma'am, but what matters is why it keeps breaking. $20,000 of antiques is a lot. 3 broken hearts is more. You know what I mean." They did not like that. Margaret called it tolerance, Richard called it weakness, and Tyler called it a game, but kids can smell truth. They always can. I picked up a book that had survived the blast zone, The Prince and the Pauper. I said my grandmother used to tell me rich folks buy books to decorate shelves. Decent folks read them to decorate souls. Then I told the boys about my little brother, how he loved to build tall, until we learned wide beats tall, how a stray bullet took him when I was 15 and the room dropped its shoulders. That was the first crack in a very shiny wall. The next morning, I didn't punish, I didn't bargain, I gave them a mission. Special operations, I called it, because boys who love war stories will do anything for a badge. Tyler became architect and Chief Dylan, our color captain, Mason the analyst. We cooked breakfast like a tiny kitchen brigade. We measured pancake batter like engineers. We signed our names in little notebooks, and when Nora the housekeeper slid a plate across the counter, Tyler said, "Thank you," like it was a brand new word that tasted good. Margaret watched from the doorway and frowned. Order without yelling confused her. Richard scanned headlines and muttered about teaching people lessons, and at night, the walls told the truth anyway. The fights weren't hot. They were cold, the kind that make a child hold his breath. Words like inferior and people who don't deserve what they have leaked under doors. Something crashed in an office where windows don't open, and the next day Mason asked me if grown-ups have to break things to feel big. That was the twist for me. That was the moment the story flipped from spoiled children to wounded mirrors. The boys weren't inventing chaos, they were translating it. Yeah, that happened. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I called my friend Dr. Jasmine Parker, social worker. Steady voice, straight spine told her what I'd heard, what I'd watched, the flinches, the script, the 17 revolving doors, and she said, "What good social workers always say, if you believe there's emotional harm, document, carefully protect yourself, be precise. Wealthy families are very good at fog." So I wrote down times and dates I recorded when the law allows. I took photos of the red paint and the shattered glass, and the tiny fists around big words they didn't understand. And one afternoon, Nora found me in the garden, told me she'd worked there 15 years, told me if the truth needed a witness, she would lend her eyes, and I felt the ground steady under my feet. Of course, Richard tried to intimidate me, men like that always do, leaned in close and said, "You work for us, not the other way around." And I told him the only line I had rehearsed. "You can fire me whenever you want, sir. But as long as I am here, I will treat your children like human beings and not problems to be solved." And he called it attitude. I called it north. The boys called it safety, without having to use that word. "Respect teaches more than fear," I said, and he laughed like fear had better ratings. The morning the gray van rolled through the gate, the air felt thinner. Department of Social Services Jasmine at the front, with flats and files. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. We are here for a welfare check based on multiple corroborated reports." And Margaret tried to spin her pearls into a shield. "Our family is respected, surely. This can be handled discreetly," and Jasmine, bless her, said, "Children's safety isn't a public relations negotiation." Richard reached for his lawyers, pointed at me like an accusation, could erase a recording. "You did this, you came to sabotage us." And I said, "I came to care for your sons. If shining a light on the room hurts your eyes, that's not sabotage, that's daylight." Interviews in the library, one boy at a time, an advocate present, no leading questions. Just space and time, and the boys told the boring details that proved the big things, the breakfasts, the bridges made of toothpicks, that held the nights when voices went low and mean, the words they learned because grown-ups used them like salt. Nora stood up calm and clear, said she had seen enough to be a witness, and the wheel moved. The investigation looked at more than paint, and feathers looked at patterns, at the way a house can train children without ever touching them. And while that wheel spun, another one wobbled. Financial irregularities sniffed out by people who follow numbers for a living, and the perfect picture cracked where the frame was weakest. The boys didn't go to strangers. Thank God they went to close relatives with steady voices and thick walls. And when I visited, Tyler had a clipboard and a new mission feelings chart. He said every night we put a sticker where our day felt the strongest. "What color is brave?" I asked. He grinned green like go. Dylan counted marshmallows without eating them all. "Progress," Mason asked if foundations in bridges and families were basically the same thing. I said yes, and he wrote it down like a formula. The Whitmores learned humility the hard way, contracts canceled, club membership evaporated. Margaret stepped down from charity boards, where smiles raise money while silence costs nothing. Richard faced the kind of consequences money delays, but cannot always deny, and I won't pretend I cheered. I didn't. I was tired. I was busy building something I now had proof the world needed. 2 years later, I stood on a stage I never imagined accepted an award. I didn't chase our nonprofit. Had helped more than 300 kids stabilize in homes that chose respect over fear. Jasmine had written new protocols that protected truth-tellers better. Nora moved on to a job with dignity baked into the paychecks, and the boys, well, they grew into themselves. Tyler ran point on a school project that kept the peace in a noisy hallway. Dylan fell in love with numbers and stopped using paint to talk. Mason wrote stories where the hero admits he is scared and keeps going anyway. People ask if I hate the Whitmores. I don't hate eats the room children need to heal. And people ask if rich families can learn humility without losing everything. And I say, I don't know maybe, but gravity is a better teacher than lectures. And then they ask if I would do it again, walk into a war and call it a classroom. And I say yes, not because I like the fight, but because I like the moment a child looks at an adult and realizes they won't run. You know what I mean. That house taught me a simple metric. What you model is what you get. Fear buys silence. Respect buys honesty. Honesty buys change, and change is slow until it is sudden. Then everyone calls it a miracle when really, it was pancakes measured at breakfast. Bridges held together by patience and triangles, tiny notebooks signed in shaky letters. Small kindnesses that add up. If you want a neat ending, I can't sell you one. The boys still have hard days. The adults still have pride that wakes up before wisdom. The internet still argues about whether this was justice or spectacle. But the kitchen in their new home smells like basil because they planted some. They say, "Thank you," without being prompted. They know brave is green, and when the room gets cold, they know how to name it. Tell me what you think. Is respect stronger than fear? Can people raised on power learn humility without falling? Where do you draw the line between discipline and damage? Drop your take in the comments. Share this if you believe kids deserve safety more than families deserve image, and if you've lived a version of this, big or small, add your story. Your voice might be the daylight someone else needs.